Okay, guys, so let's talk about something that's really near and dear to me, conversion rate optimization. Each of you kind of work on CRO, and it's fairly deep in the trenches. Would that be correct to say that? Yes?
Yeah.
Fairly deep in the trenches. Okay, so one of the things that I was noticing it was Sean Ellis from Growth Hackers. He did a presentation I think it was a couple of days ago. I can't remember which conference it was at.
Inbound.
At Inbound, yes, that one. Okay, and he talked about basically this loop that many companies get stuck in, where they just go test everything, anything and everything, and get very minimal results. So what are they doing wrong there?
Am I starting? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think people tend to look at, like we were saying before, like look at a lot of the buttons, look at a lot of the different tests that people do all the time, and they try it on their site, and then when they say like the button color doesn't work, oh, this CRO thing is crap, we're not gonna do it. And they don't really pick the really big things that could affect growth. And the really big things are, you find out from your customer that, you know, they're not even checking the one page that you really want them to look at in order to get through your funnel. They're not looking at it, so that's really big. Maybe we should just move the page or have them land on that page and start from there. Those type of things are like the really big tests, and they're just ignoring those things. So I think people tend to not think big enough when they're looking
Right.
at the most traffic site pages as well.
I find it's a mindset thing. It's a lot of companies are running tests just to get a lift, when just because it's a flat test doesn't mean it wasn't worth running. If you learn something, it was worth running. And I think the other half of that is, if you're just running tests with the mindset of, I need to try to make them buy something, I think you're doing it backwards. I think sometimes the way to think about it is, I need to make their life easier. And make this easier for them to do, and then you'll get your lift as just a result of doing it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and let's be honest. I mean, it's a prioritization thing. I can come up with 100,000 tests for your website right now, and the
I would
problem
like
is.
to challenge you to do that.
Oh God.
Let's
All
do it.
right.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
One.
Do we have time now? Can we do?
And if we do that, though, the problem is we only have so many man hours, you know, and especially if you're working with an agency, you're saying, you know, you have X amount of money, time, and tests that you can run on a given month, and, you know, go through my list of 100,000 alphabetically. And you're like, well, okay, you know, I could, but that's not the best way. And so we need to start figuring out, how do we sort that? How do we find the best test to run first? Or the not necessarily the one that's going to give us the most lift, but the one that's going to give us the best direction to go on in the future.
Right. Okay, so I'm assuming that most of you guys don't have carte blanche on running the different kinds of tests you do on your respective companies and platforms, or for clients, for example. So there is an element of being able to pitch the test and what it might achieve. Now, obviously, that works well when your idea or hypothesis resonates well with whoever it is that you're pitching to. When you lock horns with somebody who has an opposing point of view, how do you resolve that? Because without doing that, you can't even run your test, at least not without burning some bridges.
Oh, someone else start. I need to think.
You know what? Most of the time, if I run into a conflict over whether or not I should run a test, it means I didn't pitch it with data. It means I said, we need to run this because here are 10 examples of, like somebody did this to me not too long ago. I have a whole bunch of tabs in Excel of people with orange buttons, and I think orange buttons are going to sell better. He didn't have any data with it. Now, luckily, I had a little blank point, so I ran the test, and orange buttons were a $3.5 million loss. Because he came to me for something with absolutely no data. So if I have data and I've told the story, it almost shouldn't happen. And if it does happen, then maybe we run both tests.
Yeah, I was really hoping that everyone was kind of a really good answer to that. But yeah, no, I mean, I think it comes back to data too. All of the tests that I've recommended so far have usually been based in data. Not necessarily I can show you that you'll have a 10% raise or something of the sort, but at least we've done a user behavior analysis, and we've shown that users have complained about this roadblock in their user experience, and it's stopping them from converting. And so if I can show them that, and I can show them the data that backs it up, then that'll give me the go-ahead to do the tests. And if it doesn't, you know what? That's fine. At the end of the day, it's their money. I'll push them a little bit, but I'm not gonna butt heads with them and ruin their day.
Yeah, if you prove they have a problem to solve, how can they say no to you?
Exactly.
because I don't work in an agency, I really don't get that a lot. So I think the biggest thing for me is the test that I decide to run might not be big enough or crazy enough for people in Shopify. Shopify likes crazy tests. So it has to be something that's going to affect, make a huge result, like mobile versus desktop, how does a landing page do? What can we do to make each experience better? The highest trafficked pages, what can we do, especially landing pages? Can we create different landing pages for those type of things? Those are like the type of tests I get a lot. But I think the biggest, I would say, fail that I've done, the big conflicty thing that I've had, would be I made the mistake of telling my VP straight to his face that he was saying something about, let's try this, let's try that, and we can always try testimonials. And I'm like, testimonials always work. And I kind of took my stand. And he's like, really, they do? Like, by how much? And I had no answer because I read all the things and I said that they just work. So he's like, why don't you test it? So I go back, run the test. A week later, I start seeing testimonials is doing so much better than the one with testimonials. And I freak the fuck out. Literally freak out. I didn't even know how to go back. So immediately I changed the test, made press. I actually brought up press, removed the testimonials, and then I found out that having press and not testimonials actually did way better than both of them.
Right.
So while I came back with tail between my legs saying, okay, you might have been right, the testimonials don't really work, I still had this other test to show forth to say, you know what, the press thing actually worked, and I still felt really bad because I felt like it was a fail.
I'm stealing that.
Yeah.
Do it. Okay, so the other thing that I see that first-time CRO testers get wrong pretty often is knowing how much to test and how long to test for. So all good tests are rooted in some level of statistics, of course. So things like sample size, confidence levels, error ratios. Those are important. If you don't really have a background in statistics, how do you know how long to test for and what sample size to test for?
We have data analysts for that.
I'll give you a three-pronged answer. I look at three things when I finish a test. The first thing is, of course, time. The minimum a lot of testing consultants will give you is 2 weeks, so that I've got 2 Mondays, 2 Tuesdays, etc. It really depends on your marketing calendar. If once a month you have a giant flash sale on a Tuesday, you're going to want to run it for more than one of those to make sure it comes through. That's number one. Number two is I just look at the graph and look at A and B, and in the first couple of days, A and B are going to be trading places and going all over the place. Once that data normalizes, and I've got A and B staying roughly, on a graph, they usually end up staying the same distance apart, and they keep going as I've got a bigger data set. It looks like I've got a pretty good result. So even if it's not 100%, 99% confident. And then the third thing that I look at is what's called the confidence interval. Mm-hmm. How high does it go when it goes up? How low does it go when it goes down? I recently had a test I finished. My interval was +1 to -9. The over result was flat. So I called it flat but high risk, because when it goes down too much. So.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day too, it depends on how low level your conversions are. So if it's an e-commerce purchase, you can have a lot more confidence in the results of your test. But if it, for example, a lot of our service, our SEO service clients, our goals for them is, I filled out a form. So it's not actually a conversion. We can guess the value of that conversion based on the number of times those form leads convert into sales on the client side. But since it's a middleman step, I'm less confident with those conversions than I would be with an e-commerce sale. So that's one of the aspects that I'm usually concerned with. But at the end of the day, I need to see quite a significant number of actual conversions to the page. It's not just about how much traffic I put through it. If I put 100,000 visitors to your site and I only get 10 conversions, it's going to take quite a while. It's going to take a lot of traffic to get me something that's reasonable.
You just say a minimum of 200.
200 conversions. That's a good rule. Yeah.
I usually do. I let it run for 2 weeks. Again, always making sure the Monday to Monday type of thing, just so you have enough days. I also not only find out the answer and see if it's statistically confident, but then once I change the thing that I need to change, wait 2 weeks and actually see if it did what I wanted it to. Like for us, getting our conversion right from visitor to customer is really important to us. So we have our signups, we have our prospects, but it's really about getting that customer lift. So it takes a little bit longer for us. my first company that I did this with, it was like a 9-month time frame, so you forget the test by the time you got the answer. But here it's like every month you can pretty much know how a test is going to run. So it's really important for us to see that lift, because sometimes the test, it's just better. One version is just better than the other. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the answer that you think you are.
That's great. So when you're thinking about being able to test pages, do you look at doing tests that are relatively large? Like, for example, taking a landing page with a static image and then testing it with a video, for example, because your hypothesis might be that video will improve conversions? Or do you focus on multiple small things within pages? So, for example, moving something above the fold, changing positioning of copy versus hero image, alternating between them. What approaches do you usually take?
I usually do big. I start big. So like, let's say it's a long page versus a short page. We'll kind of do that first. I actually follow, this is probably easier. The biggest thing is make sure you have a value prop. Is your value prop the right thing? Then look at how many distractions. Can I remove distractions? Can I decrease anxiety? Can I make it more clear? Can I make it more relevant? And can I make it more urgent? So those are kind of the things that I look at, and I kind of test to see, okay, we'll all look at the page and kind of decide, okay, where on the graph will we say these things are? Is it one higher than the other? Like, are we really clear, but like really suck at relevancy? Like, where are we? So those are the kind of items that I try to test first. But we never test too many things at once, because the first thing someone's going to tell you as soon as you say something did well was, how do you know which thing it was? And then you're slammed with that and you're kind of stuck. And
Right.
you don't know. And really you'll guess. And that sucks, because you don't really have a leg to stand on.
I go both ways on this answer, because sometimes I like to test a lot of smaller things because my purpose is to learn. So I'm going to start moving a bunch of little things around because I want to make sure that I have the answer to that "what did it" question. But I think most of the time I've become impatient with that, because in moving little things, you're taking a gamble that you're gonna end up doing 10 little tests before you get any kind of a big win if you get lucky. So what I tend to do now is the big test first, because if I don't get a result out of a big test, then there's no point doing the small test. And then once I do get a result, I can actually iteratively do the same test as a multivariate and swap out all the elements to now learn why as a secondary test.
Right.
And for the last couple of years, I've been kind of pushing myself in that approach, and it seems to work well for me. So.
Yeah, I do something similar to that. I don't like the small tests. I mean, if you're talking about a small test, frequently it's that what you were saying, Chris, about being able to stand back and look at it and see the results from far away. So usually, that's what you'd think of as a big test. It has to be visually apparent. But sometimes it's just the copy on a button, like you were saying. But for the most part, that doesn't really work for me. Copy on a button isn't really the biggest deal. So what I like to do is the major test, but I'll do the ABN style tests, and I'll try to make sure I can focus on the one thing I'm changing. So for example, if I'm changing a CTA to use different creative, I'll have one of the variations use the same copy from the previous. To see if it's the creative that's changing it or if it's the copy that's changing it, and I'll just have different creatives and different copy that goes kind of through it. So I can kind of select multiple hypotheses and test them all at the same time. I think the other issue we come across in doing CRO is the limitations in implementation. And it takes a lot of buy-in to get the test started in the first place. It takes a lot of work to get it through creative. Time getting it to creative, back from creative, approved, back from that, implemented, and put online. It's limiting the number of small tests you can run. If I have to do that entire process for 10 small tests, it's going to take you the whole year, I might as well do one big test and try to prove multiple hypotheses and get through that whole process once. But that might just be an agency mindset.
Yeah, or the mindset of ask for forgiveness later. So just do it, and if it worked well, then mention it. Yeah. Okay, cool. So when you're thinking about sort of your overall conversion stack of tools, so you've got obviously your actual testing tool, right? Then you have usually you might have some sort of landing page tool as well to kind of quickly in an agile fashion build pages. What are your go-to tools, not just the one for, let's say, Optimizely or Visual Web Optimizer? What are your go-to tools that you typically have as part of your optimization stack?
Before the test, I would say Crazy Egg, kind of understand what's happening on the page. Qualaroo, asking people, why they didn't convert, just kind of a pop-up like when they leave, and also any kind of information that we get back from people right when they sign up, like why did you sign up, and also customer information from our data center, just any kind of support tickets or all that kind of stuff I kind of read right before, and Google Analytics. And then when the test is going, again, we use Optimizely, but after the test, it's really important then to go back to Google Analytics and kind of see if you see the information. And
Right.
even if Optimizely, I mean, they're trying to sell themselves too. So like they're going to make these tests look amazing. Some tests we get, it's like 200% increase. And you're like, yeah, I rock. And then you look and it's really like 15%. So like you have to kind of go back and make sure the analytics is telling the same story.
This changes depending on the test, but on a generic level, I'll generically say customers. So that's survey data, CRM data, all that stuff, based on what I said earlier too. Fallout reports, huge. Anything that will build a fallout. So I'm using Adobe / Omniture Test and Target. I'm using Site Catalyst. I can build a fallout. I can put my, check out whatever I want in order, and I can see what's happening. I think seeing where they hit those high commitment levels is a really big trigger for me.
Right.
Test and Target, in terms of A/B testing tools, is my favorite right now. And it goes back to what you were saying about waiting and seeing which element made the difference. I'll give you a button test example really quickly from last holiday, where I ran 3 different sizes, 3 different colors, and 3 different text labels. And it spits out all the different variations I need to build, and I build these 9 recipes and go with it. And it gives me which one had the most influence. First of all, what was the best recipe? This size,
Right.
this color, this text. Which one had the best influence? So a really good multivariate testing tool for me is huge.
And do you use one that's off the shelf or custom built?
Test and Target,
Test and
yeah.
Target,
Test and
okay.
Target does everything off the shelf. So
I mean, just to add to the before we run a test tools, Patty Track. I think Matt mentioned that earlier. Patty Track's amazing. You have to learn how to set it up, and that's kind of an intensive process. But the problem that it solves is, where are my users falling out of the funnel? And you can usually do that in your analytics as well. It's just Patty Track is very, very visual as well. So I can run this test multiple times, and it's not going to be, okay, yeah, but it went from 43% to like 41%, what have you, because those numbers kind of start getting lost to you when you're monitoring, 5 different funnels on the same site, and you're trying to get through all these numbers on a monthly basis. So it's nice visually to look at that with Patty Track. When we're actually implementing the tests, I've started to integrate custom dimensions in analytics. I think in every single test I've run in the last 3 months, I've included custom dimensions, because if you're looking at a CRO tool like Optimizely, it'll set you 2 goals right away, it'll set you the 1 goal right away, which is engagement. And engagement, as far as Optimizely is concerned, is the elements that the user has clicked on a page. And that's not how I define engagement. So that metric right away is useless to me. And then the second one, or whatever have you for your additional goals, they're going to be the ones that you set yourself. So if it's a button click, then it's a button click. But frequently, we're adding an extra CTA to a page, or an extra call to action to a page, or we're revising an existing CTA, or we're duplicating a CTA to have it in a more relevant section of the page. We're changing copy, something like that, and it can have multiple effects. That's why we do multivariate testing frequently. So I want to be able to see what effect did it have on that segment of traffic that was exposed to this test. And so a custom dimension in analytics lets you track that user's flow through the entire site after they've been exposed to this one test. So I can tell you what their engagement level is in all the different engagement metrics that I can find in analytics, whether they converted on a goal, whether they purchased other products, all sorts of things. And I think that's the biggest lifesaver. And I was speaking to the gentleman here from CallRail about how Optimizely is now integrating that custom dimension setup. So if you're getting into CRO, you can avoid all the hassle that I had learning how to integrate. They just do it right away out of the box.
and my rule with any test is never launch a test without those segments.
Oh yeah.
Specifically new versus returning. And
Yeah.
from a technical standpoint, having the browsers is good too, because we've run a lot of tests where Chrome just sucks, and we realized that our test actually just sucked in Chrome and we didn't QA it well enough. But new returning is huge because you need
Yes.
to make sure that you're not seriously pissing off that returning group, because if it's an e-com site, your returning customers are going to be worth a lot more than your new customers.
Yes. And Optimizely, how many of you actually use Optimizely? Show of hands in the room. Okay, so one of the limitations of Optimizely as well is when you get into super complex tests, and you start using their preview tool to edit JavaScript, for example, or change things like the on-the-fly editor, basically, it craps out sometimes. So it's often better if you have developer support to actually build 2 different versions of the page and just use Optimizely to split test the traffic, but not necessarily use Optimizely to change page elements on load of the page, basically.
One interesting thing that we just found was that we were doing Optimizely for a lot of redirecting things, and it was actually increasing page load time.
Yes.
So then we realized that the page load time was actually what was decreasing conversion, not exactly the. So you got to kind of sometimes take a step back and kind of see what's really happening in the tests. And once we had to create our own little redirecting tool within, like our developers kind of created it just because we were having that problem.
Right.
There's a sneaky solution to that issue, actually. So if you, with Optimizely tests, there's JavaScript loaded on the site for Optimizely. And if you add a certain variable to the end of the URL of the live site, you'll see the variation. It's the best way to test it. I've never launched a test.
That's just
Optimizely.
I
checklist.
QA the same
Yeah,
way. I
QA
query
it that way.
parameter it so that I can see it live. Yeah.
Right on. Okay, cool. So, I mean, you guys have big budgets, and I'm assuming not only for CRO, but also for the acquisition of traffic to the sites, right? Let's start thinking about doing CRO on a smaller scale. So if you could just think back to like, how can you possibly do this for a small to mid-sized business who doesn't really have a very good understanding of conversion rate optimization, but does have an intuitive pulse on what their customers' needs are? How would you do CRO on a shoestring budget?
I actually work with clients who are on that kind of in that issue, and Unbounce is amazing because you can test so many different types of things and so many different templates that really work. So that's been amazing for them.
And that's $100 per month, so it's
Yeah.
fairly affordable.
Yeah, and what I found too, it's great to kind of get a client in the mindset to really believe in CRO, because for the longest time they think, you know what, my website's amazing. I created this page, it's gotten us a lot of visitors. I don't see how, this new tool is going to do well. Like we just did that for a psychiatrist that I work for. And we removed the nav, we created a small page, we sent them there, and it was like a 300% increase in actual customers within a month. And they were just like, okay, whatever you want to do, just take over our website, we'll do anything. But like, that's kind of the difference that you get, especially when you have a very overcrowded page on already, and you have like, people are sending things to the homepage, which makes me cry. But that type of thing, like, I think that's really important.
I think for the smaller customers, I think the first thing we have to kind of step back and realize is that they're going to have less traffic right off the bat, and you need traffic to run a test. So it kind of goes back to the conversation earlier about testing a whole bunch of little things versus testing really big things. Is you can't test a whole bunch of really little things on a low traffic site because their tests are going to take 2 or 3 months sometimes to finish to get enough traffic and enough conversions. So I'm going to be trying pulling these tiny little levers to try to get something to go. Is, get your free tools, get your Google Analytics and, Google Experiments, as it's now called, or, any other basic testing tool, make big changes. You're going to have to sit a little higher up in the funnel a lot of the time because you need the traffic for the test. But, just zero in on those abandonment spots with the most traffic and just go nuts on it.
Yeah, same thing, and just large changes. The problem too with CRO, if you have very little traffic, is you can't do many variations because the more variations you have, the less traffic each variation gets, and at the end of the day, you don't have significant, data significance,
right.
So you can't make reasonable decisions. So it's more of an approach of what are all the best practices, and experience really plays a role. So it's not, standard says you should do this. Because obviously you are going to have to test it. But with a small site, you are going to have to use some of your hypotheses and just say, I think this is going to work. And you do that for tons and tons of different ideas, and you just do a major A/B test and let that run. Because odds are it's going to run for 3 months, and you're going to see, you're probably going to see a lift. If you're actually good at CRO, it's not just about data. After a while, you get used to what elements you need to change, what's really going to move the needle.
Okay, so that's super important. Now, if you could have a choice, okay, between improving user experience, reduce impediments, basically, in getting the user to whatever goal that you either want them to get to or they naturally want to get to anyways, versus improving copy. So rather than doing aesthetic or UX-oriented changes versus working on improving copy, essentially, so selling features and benefits through text, which one would you rather go with?
UX always first. That's content. Like once I do all the big changes, then you can get those small little wins with the content I found.
Yeah, it's always an interesting argument between the SEO guys and the usability guys is whose thing do we fix?
Right.
And I think one of the realizations we have to come to and what makes this question difficult is the fact that they're both actually trying to accomplish the same thing. Good content's trying to drive more organic traffic, which usually converts better, and off you go. I would argue that the usability tests are a really good place to start if you're new to testing because you can get some of those wins. If I can't navigate through checkout, I'm not going to see all the pretty things that you just put on the page. So I think I would probably agree. I'd do some usability first and then start having a mix.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all agreed. I mean, if you're to change, little pieces of text all over the site, I mean, all of my experiments, they've been maybe one or two that have actually had double-digit changes. But for the most part, it's very small improvements. Often a lot of, had no effect. I'm not even going to recommend it to the development team because it's going to cost them more to implement than it's going to earn them. So at the end of the day, yeah, user experience for sure.
One of the best experiences I've had so far, me and our SCM guy kind of work together as much as we can. I kind of got him in the same room because he wasn't really sure about the CRO thing, and he really needed to see it in AdWords, what I was doing. So we took the most high traffic keyword, and we created a landing page for it. And he saw he wasn't allowed to touch it. He wasn't allowed to do anything, no bidding, no nothing. And we started seeing a lift off one of the changes. The biggest thing was kind of removing distractions and that sort of thing. Then we took it one step further and we kind of changed all the content to kind of make sure it kind of followed sense and did all those things. And we made it e-commerce was in the headline and everything. We saw another bump in traffic. And the nice part about this was we also saw quality score increase as well, which made everything just cheaper and better and amazing. So now that he was like gung-ho, this is great, he gave me another keyword. And then we got to kind of, now I'm getting like maybe 2 keywords at a time. And it's really improved. And we've really seen that hockey stick.
I like to tell SEO guys that if you let me test removing crap, your page becomes more relevant because I've removed all the crap.
Or just give money. Put money down on the table and say, like, I bet you this. And
That's
if you're
a great way of going about it.
Honestly,
we actually have a running bet going at PBS right now in a test,
yeah,
right?
It's on donuts, unfortunately.
It's on donuts. Okay, it's not on money. Okay, well, donuts are donuts. That's
yeah,
fine.
anything
enjoy
works.
them.
Just if someone wants to test against you, just put money down on the table and say, fine.
So last question, guys. I mean, when you're doing testing, you often are wrong, and you're so wrong. You're like, how could I be this wrong? And you find out something in a test that is. It reveals that aha moment where you start thinking about conversion rate optimization differently. Can you define what that was in each of your careers thus far?
Yeah, you know what it was? I remember it actually. It was a landing page test, and I think I was reading some Tim Ash stuff or something out there somewhere, and it said,
Sitetuners.com.
And everything was showing these landing pages that were like 3 sentences long with a headline and all white space and a bunch of supporting logos and a form. And somewhere along the line, I convinced myself that this was going to be the winner. And I tested it against like the longest landing page that mankind has ever seen. And this is a no-brainer. And I was so wrong. It was insane. It was like high double-digit changes. And the longer, uglier landing page won.
Wow.
And I kind of stepped back and went, okay, this isn't what I thought it was. And as it turned out through iterative testing, I started to, come up with the theory that it was, I very clearly wasn't providing enough information to make you want to buy. I was asking you to marry me with I think as you said earlier, I walked up to you in a bar and said, will you marry me? And it didn't work. And in the first version, I went, I like long walks on the beach, blah, 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 all the way down. And then people converted like crazy. So
right on. Okay.
For me, it was just the first time that it happened. The first time I really, I had all the data backing up the tests, and I said, this is definitely going to work. And then we ran the test. It was just basically our client had a good 20 search filters or search criteria, all just little check boxes the same size. And so we did eye tracking and figured out these are the ones that people are actually looking at. We did some analytics to figure out which ones they were actually using. And they were all just kind of like, spread out. And I figured, okay, well, let's just put them in order of priority that they were used. And I mean, come on, everyone agrees with me, right? That seems like it would improve engagement. Anyway, it didn't. And I went back to it so many times. And I was supposed to report to the client on it for about 2 months. And I just didn't, because I ran the experiment, I think 3 other times to try to figure out what was going on. Like, did I screw up the data? Try to get different sets. And I realized, you know what, maybe I should just stop trying to massage the data and just give up and realize that I'm not always right. And I think that really kind of hit me really hard. And then all my tests after
that's
that.
actually very important, because you guys are you fans of Freakonomics? You know about the book? Okay, so in Think Like a Freak, which is their newest book, they actually have a chapter on people not being able to say I don't know, and it's sometimes okay to say I don't know, right? And admit that you're wrong on that test, right?
Yeah, it was hard, but I did.
I think one of the interesting or important things about testing is that having a huge lift in one of your recipes isn't the only goal. You don't necessarily just have a win because you increase something. Right. You have a win because you learn something that you can apply. Whether it's, whether I was right about my recipe B, or whether I was completely wrong, or even if it was flat.
Right. There's
learnings in all 3 of those. And I think that's the hardest thing to kind of let go of.
So we were doing a test on, we had noticed that removing navigation really helped with our SCM landing pages and stuff. So we decided to kind of do it across the board, because our SEO guy was like, yeah, sure, try it and see what happens. Maybe I'll convert better. Awesome. So we tried it across the board, and we found out that SEO didn't actually, it needed the nav. People like to wander and that sort of thing, which was okay. That wasn't bad. And then while I was gone on vacation, someone removed brand, like PPC brands, and they kind of tested that separately along with PPC, and we found out that actually brand people on PPC wanted the nav. So then it was just like, okay, wait a second, do they want to wander? Suddenly all our pages that we were sending them to just didn't seem smart for brand. So then we're like, let's go and test the home page again and see if that worked. That didn't, but we found another page that actually did, that made them wander around and kind of do something. So that was something I was so mad when they moved my test while I was on vacation. Do not do that. But at the same time, we got this incredible learning that now we were ready to kind of go a completely different direction with brand and actually separate it out from PPC.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you guys. I mean, that wraps up our session. It's the last panel for the day. We're going to be heading into the expert Q&A right after this, but please give it up for these guys.